Today is May 31st, 2006. I am Sarah Locker. It is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Venturia, North Dakota. Can you state your full name, including your maiden name?
My name is Mildred Glatt Wald.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Hague, October 17th. I'm giving away my age.
Sorry.
1936.
Were you born at home in
Yep,
the hospital?
at home.
Was there a midwife or a doctor present?
I don't remember.
Did anybody ever tell you any stories?
I know my mother was real sick after I was born. She had problems with one of her legs. They called it a milchfuß, which means milk leg. I'm not sure what that all meant. But to her dying day, she had problems with that leg. Something through pregnancy, I don't know. Not real sure what it was all about. I know my sisters didn't like me. They didn't want me. And one of my older sisters tells the story of how she was just down and out and nobody upset with the whole family, with the whole world. And she was so determined she was not going to like this new baby. Absolutely not. And on that day when she was down and out, she looked in the crib and I smiled at her and she says, I fell in love with that little Millie and I still love her to this day. So.
Did you ever hear any other interesting stories about your brothers and sisters' reactions to you?
Not long ago, Millie or Mildred is such a different new kind of name during that era. Everybody had names according to, were named after aunts and uncles and stuff. And I asked my older sister here not too long ago where they found my name, who named me, because I have no aunts or anybody named Mildred. And nobody seemed to really remember. I guess should have asked this a long time ago, but there was another family in the Hague area that had a Mildred. So I'm thinking probably it came from there. You hear it's a new name. And it's funny, my mother, her name was Elizabeth, and her older sister was Catherine. And mother named her oldest daughter Catherine, and Aunt Katie named her oldest daughter Elizabeth. Then they each had a Lena, they each had a Mary, they each had a Barbara. Lena, Mary, Barbara. Yeah, that's it. And they each had a Peter, too. It's everybody named their kids the same. It's just weird how that all works.
It's quite a lot confusing, trying to figure out which one you're talking about, which family.
Yes. Well, when sisters do that, it's not so bad because the last names are different. But when brothers start doing it, like I have a brother named Alvin. My younger brother's name is Alvin. Bill has a brother named Alvin. And we go and name one of our boys Alvin. So when we're talking about Alvin, Big Alvin, Little Alvin, or Son Alvin. Bill's brother is always, we'll sometimes say Brother Alvin or Son Alvin. And Bill always refers to my brother as Little Al because he's a smaller person, so.
What's the earliest memory you have?
I remember going to school. I remember writing 44. I don't really remember anything before that, True. I remember going to school by bike, by sled. When my older siblings were in school yet, my brother would drive a team of horses and a trailer. We'd go to school that way. And I remember one time we had two-wheel trailer with probably a box on about that high, and not really very safe. And we had a pony that we hitched to that trailer, and I hated that because I'm a scaredy cat. I'm scared of everything, and that always was so scary to me. And one day, I don't know if it was intentional or if it was accidental, my brother liked to harass me. And coming downhill, that pony kind of got away from him. And we went down the hill too fast and hit a rock. And I don't remember if the trailer tipped or if we just all fell off. But I know I hit a rock. I was kind of sick after that for a while. So, and I remember driving. My dad, once I was the oldest going to school, my dad had a sled. Anyway, this sled was built, for one horse. And then we had cold winters back in those days. And he went ahead and he took just a regular house window and he somehow rigged it on that sled. So I had a windshield to sit behind, so it wasn't quite so cold. But we had 1.5 miles to school, and boy, that was cold. Your hands would be so stiff by the time you'd get there, you could hardly unhitch the horse. But I managed. Somehow you get through it.
What was it like growing up on the plains, dealing with the weather?
You had to be tough. That's one thing. The North Dakota winters are pretty, well, not so much anymore, but they don't mess around with wimps. You got to be tough to survive, and you got to have winter survival smarts. And one thing, I've never had the experience, but one thing they say, a horse will always take you home if you let him go. If you get caught out in a blizzard, if you let your horse go, it will take you home. And, I've heard many stories about that. So, but when the weather was too bad, my dad would take us to school. And like I said, in the summertime, I would sometimes ride my bike, and my brother would ride the pony, and we'd get there one way or another.
Which season was your favorite?
I like winter better than summer. The heat and I don't mix well. I just don't do well in the hot. I always say in the wintertime when it's cold, you can put it on, and eventually you'll be warm. But when it's hot, you can be naked and it's still hot.
Very true.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your family. Did you know your grandparents on your father's side?
No, they died. They were gone before I was born.
Did you know the grandparents on your mother's side?
Yes, I did. I remember Grandma and Grandpa Solly very well. We'd always stop there Sundays after church. We'd always stop at Grandma and Grandpa's a little bit. And as you'd come in, Grandpa would be sitting in his chair, and all the kids would have to go up to him, and he was always sitting with his legs spread way apart, and you had to go and stand between his legs, and he'd grab your head, ho, 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 and he'd say your name. I hated that. Oh, that to me was so, I don't know, demeaning or I don't know. I just hated that. But I still like to go there because it always smelled so good in Grandma's house. She was always cooking something. We didn't eat there. We went home then and ate, but, Grandma couldn't feed us. We were a large family. I'm from a family of 12 children. My mother, let's see, how is that? On my dad's side, he had 5 brothers and 5 sisters. Wait a minute. My mother, okay, in my dad's family, there were 5 boys and 5 girls. My mother's family, there were 4 girls and 4 boys. And then they got married, and they had 6 boys and 6 girls. So it went from 4 and 4 to 5 and 5, and then to 6 and 6. My very oldest brother died when he was 3 months old. He had convulsions and died. And then Pius died. Katie, John, Ben, twins, Barbara, Pete, and then was Pius. Number 8 died when he was 6 weeks old. He had what's now called spinal bifida. He had an opening on his spine, and those days they couldn't do anything about it. So he died, and now quite a few of my siblings are gone already. There was always the 4 in California and the 4 in North and South Dakota. Wait, missing 2. 4 and 6. We were 4 and 6. 4 in California and 6 of them here. 2 of them in South Dakota and 4 of them in North Dakota. And then my oldest, well, first one of the twins died. She died in 82. So we were 4 and 5. Well, then my sister in Aberdeen died. So, okay, now we're 4 and 4. Then in 2004, my sister in Ashley died, and my brother in Bismarck died. So now there's just me and Pete here yet. And the other 4, well, they're not all in California anymore, but they're in the West Coast anyway.
With your grandparents on your mom's side, you said that they lived close.
They lived in town in Hague. My mother was born in Russia. Kleinliebenstall, Russia. I got to tell you a story. One of our grandsons had to do a genealogy thing. So he called me one time and asked me all kinds of questions, Well, where was your mother born? And I told him Kleinliebenstall, and I spelled it for him. And he says, North Dakota? I says, no, in Russia. Wow, in Russia? He was just in awe about that. But anyway, that's where my mother was born. She came to America with her parents and an older brother and a younger brother and an older sister. She was 4 when they came to America. And they lived down in South Dakota, a place called Watonka or something. No, Onega, South Dakota. And they boarded cattle for other people. So my mother and her older sister, they would take turns. Today I go to school and you watch the cattle, and tomorrow you go to school and I watch the cattle. That's how they went every other day, to school. And I don't know what year it was when they moved to Hague. They came from South Dakota to Hague, and they were farmers there. Grandpa was more of a carpenter than he was a farmer. And again, I don't know what year. He retired and moved into town, and that's from where I remember him, when they lived in town. And we lived, on the farm. I grew up 5 miles northeast of Hague. And my parents built a new house and a new barn in the same year. What year? I don't know. And my older siblings tell stories of how my oldest sister was in charge, and she was very scared, I guess. And my parents were gone, and there was a weather, coming up, and so they all went over to the new house, and they were sitting, the new house wasn't finished, but they were in the basement. Apparently the old house must not have had a basement, because they were in the new basement, sitting on paint buckets till the weather was gone, and I guess it never really was much, but she was scared. My oldest sister got married before I was born. I have a niece and a nephew that are older than I am. And then I have a younger brother, so he's got 4 nieces and nephews that are older. Well, 3 nieces and 1 nephew that are older than him. So.
Quite an age gap.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I never knew my oldest sister as a sister. She was more like a favorite aunt. You know how you have your favorite aunts and uncles? That's how she was, more like a favorite aunt, because I didn't grow up with her. And that way with my oldest brother, too. I don't remember much from him being at home either. I remember him, he was in World War II. And I remember we lived in the basement of the house, and Ma would be upstairs, standing by the front door and crying. And then we'd get these letters from Ben that had sentences cut out. You know, that's how the mail got scanned and stuff. And that's what I remember from, the war and stuff. So.
Did your grandparents ever share any stories of what it was like in Russia?
Not that I recall, but my grandpa wrote an autobiography in German, of course, and one of my uncles translated it into English, and that's quite interesting how poor they were, and how he got boarded out to other people when he was a very, very young boy, because they just didn't have any food to feed themselves or their families. So he had to go work for other people to, for room and board. And it was pretty tough. I remember something in that story about his mother had set him, he was a baby, his mother had set him on the porch step, and she went someplace to get water, I think, down to the creek or whatever, to get water. And the pigs were roaming free, and a pig threw him off the step and was starting to kind of chew on him till Mother came back. Pretty bad to be eaten alive by a pig.
Were your grandma and grandpa religious?
Very, very religious. Yep, that's one thing I remember about them.
How did they show that they were religious?
They made sure you always prayed before your meals. They made sure you said your night prayers and your morning prayers. And, of course, they would always be in church, whenever. They would always go to church. And just by how they acted. My grandpa built coffins in the basement of his house. I remember not liking to go down there because of he had coffins sitting down there. And that was scary, spooky.
Did you guys ever talk about what the coffins were for, what funerals were?
Not that I remember. I mean, I knew what a coffin was, but beyond that, I remember my mother talking about dodewacht. That's wake services. When somebody died, they would sit up all night. Now, we have wake services now too, but at a certain hour, everybody goes home. But back in those days, they would stay up. Somebody had to sit with that dead person all night long and pray. So, glad I didn't have to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have any other memories of your grandma and grandpa? Any other favorite memories?
Well, isn't such a favorite one. My grandpa died from colon cancer. And he was at home, in the house, and we'd stop and see him. And I remember there was always incense burning because I guess he was giving off an odor already. And I remember that incense burning their house.
About how old were you?
Grandpa died in 47, so I was 11. And Grandma died in 56.
Where did she die from?
I don't know. I don't know what her cause of death was. Probably just old age, this giving out and that giving out, and time to check out.
Exactly. Now, you mentioned that your oldest sister and brother were kind of like an aunt and uncle to you, but did you see your actual aunts and uncles and cousins? Did you see that extended family?
Yes. The ones that lived, in the Hague area, we'd visit back and forth. But I've got some cousins. I know one of Dad's brothers moved to Washington. I know one of their daughters. And I know her only because she married a guy from Hague. I guess they got married before they moved to. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, this one daughter would come to Hague quite often. So, det är för Sibyl's Clara West. That was Uncle Joe's Clara. That's how I knew them. I knew my mother's, one of her brothers, Martin, he took over the farm, his dad's farm in Hague area. He was a very tall, very handsome man. And him and his wife were not able to have children. And every time he'd come to our house, he'd carry me around. I was big enough to where I remember this. And he just thought it had to be that my mom and dad let them adopt me and my younger brother. I remember him asking Ma, can't we please have, you've got so many children, you don't need 2 more. Can't we have them? So, but that's not that easy to do. That brings us to just something we talked about the other day, Bill and I. When we were first married, we lived in the Ashley area. And we were renting one farm after another, and we drove around looking for a place to buy. And it was up somewhere in the Fredonia area. It was an old man. In fact, he was in a wheelchair. But he had a really nice dairy barn. We'd have really liked that. But just a little dump for a house. But we had our oldest child, Twyla. We had her along, of course, and he was sitting rocking that baby. Just, you give me this little baby, he said, and I'll give you my whole farm. Even trade, he said. And once I'm not here anymore, you can have your daughter back. So, that people have big store in children, but hey, that's all we had too. I'm not going to give her up. I mean, even if you have a dozen, you're not going to give any up unless you just, well, I guess there are people that do, and sometimes need, predicts that, but no, not something you do very willingly anyway.
I'd say no. You said that the aunts and uncles in this area, you did see them often. It was like once a month, once a week?
Not weekly. Well, we'd see him in church. But we'd go to Uncle Ben's. That's my mom's oldest sister. Probably once a month. didn't always get to go along because I was younger than their youngest. But it was a real treat when we got to go along, and they would come and visit, and of course not bring the kids because they were older. And my dad had a brother, two brothers living in the Hague area, and then my mom had a brother and a sister. Yeah, just one sister. Her other two sisters moved to Minneapolis, at a younger age. So it was a real treat when they would come to visit. And everybody liked to come to visit to our farm because the cousins would get together there, and we had a big dam and had an old buggy, and they would all pile on this buggy and roll down the hill and, of course, into the dam and push it out of the water and back up the hill and do it again. That was fun.
And nobody ever got hurt?
Oh, no.
Wow. Did you have a favorite aunt or uncle?
I guess I really liked Aunt Gladys and Aunt Julie because they were from Minneapolis. They were sophisticated, and everybody said I looked just like Gladys. And so I always thought she was so pretty. I've never thought of myself, never liked how I looked, but everybody said I looked like Aunt Gladys, and I really thought she was pretty. So, yeah, I really liked her. I liked Aunt Katie too. She was nice. She was really nice.
Did you have any cousins? Any favorite cousins?
No, I don't think so. I like them all. The ones I know.
Any other adventurous games you would play besides rolling the buggy in the dam?
We went ice skating in the wintertime on that dam. Neighbor kids would come, and I wasn't in on the hockey games with the neighbor kids, but I was more, I was too young, too scared. Summertime, we'd go swimming in the dam. We had a boat. We'd go boating. Paddle it.
No motor, just paddles?
No, just paddles, yeah. Yep. I remember going swimming in the dam, and we had bloodsuckers is what we called it. I think they're leeches or something, and I don't know what they are. But you get out of the dam, and all the clinging to you, and grab them, pull them off. So.
Did you have skates when you went ice skating?
Yes, yep, we had skates. I had a pair of shoe skates even. Some people had just kind you would clip on, although they never really worked very good for ice skates. That was fine for roller skates, but for ice skates, you pretty much needed what they call shoe skates. And I had a pair. Hand-me-downs for my older siblings.
Do you remember how they played hockey?
They just had sticks, and sometimes it was a rock or a piece of wood that they'd use for a puck. It was all homemade. There were no real hockey sticks or real pucks or anything, just something to hit around on the dam.
And swimming, when you went boating, did you fish as well?
No, there were no fish in our dam.
Okay. Just went tooling around, rowing around.
Yep. Just being a big shot.
Tell me about your father. What was he like?
He was very stern, very strict, but very loving, a good man, very set in his ways. I won't call him stubborn. But he was very stubborn. But he did things He was a God-fearing man and raised his family. Not easy to raise a family of 12. And hard worker, very hard worker. I remember when when we first got tractors, and we had a little Model A, a Farmo Model A tractor. And we, for our teacher in our school, quit mid-school year. And we had to go up to another school in the district. So, I don't know how far it was from home. Probably 2.5 miles or whatever. Anyway, I was walking home from school one spring evening, and Pa had gotten stuck with the little Model A in the field, and I was going by him, and I know I grabbed, it wasn't really very stuck, but I remember grabbing that tractor by the back, and pulling a little bit, and I pulled out the tractor. So, dumb stuff like that you remember. But it was just enough of a pull to where it dislodged it. Probably would have got out anyway, but...
What was your father's name?
Mike.
When and where was he born?
He was born in North Dakota in 1886.
Was it in this area?
In Hague, east of Hague, about 3 miles east of Hague.
How was your father at expressing emotions such as love and anger and fear?
Love, unheard of. Fear, unheard of. Anger, he'd get mad, but not real often. I don't remember my dad really cussing, like some men do. But he often told the story of where Jake Mitzels, they were neighbors to the south. He, as a young man, was still at home. And they lived along the railroad tracks. And they went to Logan County to visit relatives. So that was more than just an afternoon drive. That was a 2 or 3 day drive. Or adventure. And he had to go down and sleep there. And watch the house, because hobos, guys would ride the train, I can't say the word, illegal hobos, and they would sometimes jump off and come and steal or break in or whatever. So he had to be there to watch. So in the daytime, he really didn't have much to do. He said he had really snooped out the house good. And the first thing he did, they were not allowed to use sugar in their coffee at home. So the first thing he did at Mitzel's was make himself some coffee. And he put in about 4 teaspoons of sugar. He says he had so much sugar in it already that it was almost syrupy. He says, that's the last time I used sugar in my coffee. And anyway, he had snooped out the house, so when he went to bed that night, all of a sudden he hears, what's that? Listen a while. Got up, got the revolver out of the dresser drawer, put in 6 shots, snuck out to the front door, and it had windows down both sides. And peeked out the window. Couldn't see anything. Peeked out the other side. Nobody there. Dog was laying in front of the door. Watched the dog a while. Pretty soon the dog would bring his hind leg up and scratch behind his ear, and with the heel of his foot. After that, he said, I don't care how tough you are. He said, when the time is right, everybody is scared.
How would you describe your relationship with your dad?
In the wintertime, my brother Pete and Dad and I, and sometimes my other brother Jack, he's just older than I am, we would play Frank in the wintertime. Or we had a toy bowling set. We'd bowl in the wintertime. And sometimes I would have homework. And Dad would say, Millie, mach schnell du deine Schularbeit aus dem Kartenspiele kennen. Hurry up and do your schoolwork, get your homework done so we can play cards. But homework was always first. Always first.
He did like to play games with you.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Yep. And I remember we had a wind charger on the house. It charged up a battery, and with that we ran a radio. And he made sure Saturday night battery was always charged because he liked listening to Gangbusters, and that's the only one I remember that he always wanted to listen to. And then we had one of my mother's cousins visit us one time from New York. And TV was just coming out, and he was telling us about television. And, oh, this television. And after he was gone, you know, it was hard to visualize, and I'd sit, listen to the radio, and I'd look at it. I wonder what that person looks like. I wonder what they're wearing. You know, you just had no idea what this was really going to be like. And forgot what I was going to say.
About the gentleman from New York?
Well, he was, there's not much more about that, but you know, how he clued us in that TV was coming and how. And we got a milking machine. We got electricity on the farm, our own. Dad put up a big wind charger. And then we had 12 great big batteries sitting in the basement. They were about yay square and about this high. And they were all sitting in a row, somehow connected to each other. And I know one of them had 3 balls in it. A green one, a white one, and a red one. And you would always want the green one up. That meant the batteries were full charge. And if the white one would start coming up, then it meant get the charger going. And if the red one came up, lights were out. But with that 32 volt electricity, that generated lights for the house. And my dad got a milking machine. So I never really had to milk by hand. We had milking machines. In fact, I found a picture this morning of my dad with the 3 milkers, and it's dated 1947. So in 47, we had a milking machine.
So at the same time you got the electricity then?
That's, yeah, pretty much so. Pretty much so. That was all in one scenario.
That had helped out a lot with morning milking.
Oh, yes. Definitely. Yeah, all the chores. But still had to wash the separator. I hated that. That was always the Saturday job. Had to take the separator completely apart. And the cylinders that do the actual separating, that had to be taken apart. And each one, the discs in there. You know, I don't know how many there are. There must have been about 18, 20 discs in there. They had to be washed, each one, separate. You had to wash them and clean them because they would gunk up from the milk and the cream and stuff, that would kind of stick to them. And they'd get pretty chunky by the weekend, separating. You'd run water through when you're done, but it wasn't enough to really wash it. So when the power wash separators came out, yes, my kind of game. They only had to be washed, I don't know, about once a month or so. So that was nice.
That was usually your chore on Saturday to do, is to wash the
Yes. Yes.
How long would that take you?
Oh, good half hour. Forever. But I'm saying at least a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Wow. What other chores did you have to do? What other chores were yours?
Chickens. To this day, I don't like chickens. Had to gather the eggs and carry feed up, and every once in a while I had to help clean the chicken coop, and that was, especially in the summer. Well, in the wintertime, I don't think we had to do it, but in the summertime, that was hot and dusty, and you'd sweat, and that dust would stick to you, and you'd itch, and then you'd have to carry grain up to the chicken coop from the granary, and usually oats, and itchy. Just makes me itchy just thinking about it. And that's how we had to slop the hogs too. We had a hog barn not too far from the other barn. But then summers, the hogs were put over. Dad built a hog fence on the other side of the dam. So we somehow had to transport. We had some kind of a stone boat, I guess it was, where we'd hitch sometimes a horse, later on a tractor to it, and we'd have 50-gallon barrels on there we'd mix feed in there, and oats, ground feed, and milk and water, and that was hog slop. And then we'd haul it over there, and it would slobber all over and get you, and then we'd have to pail it to the pigs, and over there too, the boys had the skunk pen where they'd go out and they'd catch skunks. I don't know, they had to be it had to be a certain time of year, I think, when their hair was right or whatever. I know they always had skunks in that for a length of time, and then they'd kill them and skin them. I think they had to be a certain time of the year, so their skins were, their hair was whatever, right, seasoned right or matured. I don't know. But anyway, along with the pig smell, there was the skunks too. And I remember Ma had, behind the car shed, she had built a little pen type thing where when the chickens would, what do? They turn into clucks. It's a cycle they go through. A cluck is a chicken that will sit on a nest of eggs and hatch them. And if you're not in the chicken raising, hatching business, you don't want that. So Mother would always pen them up in this little cage type thing until they were cooled off, Mother would say, until they were through this cycle. And then, of course, you had to take feed and water over for them, and they'd pick at you. And I always hated getting eggs, especially if there were clucks that were starting to sit on the eggs, before Mother pinned them up. They would really pick at you when you tried to get their eggs. And so as long as the nest was empty, it was easy to pick up the eggs, but not when there was chickens sitting on it.
You mentioned your mother. What was she like?
Mother was a very, Mother was always more concerned of what other people thought than she was always doing things to please other people, to put forth a good face, or I don't know how to say it, but she was very proud. Very, things always had to be in order. And of course the house had to be clean. I will never forget. They lived in Hague. We already lived here. And they doctored at Ashley. And on the way back from a doctor's appointment, they would often stop in. And that particular day, the kids was in the spring of the year. School was just about out. I had washed clothes, and when you have a large family and it's wash day, my dining room table in the middle of this room was stacked with folded clothes, unfolded clothes, and the kids came in from school and books all over and coats all over. You know, they drop everything as they come in the door, and they had brought home the class prophecy and the class wills. It's what the senior class wills to the younger students, and the prophecy, the senior class writes up a prophecy like in 10 years. One of the students would write what they think the rest of their classmates are going to be doing in 10 years. And I always enjoyed reading that. And they brought that home that day. And I was tired. I took it and I sat down over there and started reading this. And Betty was standing there, and all of a sudden she says, "Hi, Grandma!" Ma was coming up the steps. And I jumped up so she wouldn't catch me sitting down, but I wasn't smart enough to drop the paper. So she knew I was reading because I was standing there looking guilty as sin. And she took a ones around my house, and she says, "Yeah," in German, of course, "have you got time to read?" Like that was a sin. I says, "No, I don't have time to read, but I do it anyway." I says, I was tired, and I wanted to read this, so I sat down and read it.
She never would have done that herself.
Oh, never. All her ducks had to be in a row. I mean, clean was everything. She called me one time, and we were in the middle of remodeling the house. We had plaster off the walls. We had lats, you know. And, "Millie, clean your house. Jack's coming." My brother from California was coming, and he's a clean freak. How do you clean your house when you're remodeling? So I gave it a once over, good enough for me. And they came, and we, I had made supper for them, and we ate. And then, of course, my brother had never been here before. I took him around, showed him the house, and, "Oh, this is going to be like this, and this is going to be like that." And when we were in the bedroom in there, when he walked out, he ran his finger across the top of the door, woodwork. And I saw him do it. I says, "Jack, if you're looking for dirt in my house, you don't have to look that high. There's plenty of it eye level." He got red, came out and sat down with the men, and he hasn't checked my cleanliness ever since. I'm not a clean freak. I like things neat, and yeah, once in a while eating right in the dust, but as long as you don't date it, I don't care. So we got an exchange student once, and we had to be, in fact, we had two of them. We had to be interviewed and, see if you're good enough to have an exchange student. And the pastor of the Lutheran church in town, he was a guy from Hazelton. He was in charge of this area. He's the one that did our interview. And we did it in town rather than him come out here. And he says, "I have to ask you a very personal question," he said. "How clean is your house?" How do you answer a question like that? not going to tell him it's a mess, and I'm certainly not going to lie and tell him it's spotless. And I thought about it a while, and I said, well, it's clean enough to be healthy and dirty enough to be happy. He says, I like that. He said, I'm going to write that down. And he did. So it must have been okay, because we had 2 exchange students after that. So, but
how did you and your siblings get along when you were growing up?
my little brother and I got along great. My brother Jack was another story. He was rough and tough, and I was that little sissy, spoiled little girl. I didn't like him. We didn't get along. And, something like that sticks with you. He was a rough, tough character. He would come in Friday. We lived in the basement, and we always had a landing, where you come in, and we would always take our overshoes off there and carry him down the basement, so they'd be warm the next morning, like, in the wintertime. And Friday nights, he wouldn't take his overshoes off. Down the steps and in the basement, in the back room, and then he'd take his overshoes off. Jack, take your overshoes off. They got to scrub tomorrow anyway. Saturdays was cleaning day, and things like that. He played rough with the dog. We had a dog that would tear his clothes. And, Jack didn't care, and Ma would bitch at him. And so I never really liked him very well. Clara, I got along good with her, but I got along best with my little brother. Because I was older than him, I could boss him around.
What is the order of all the siblings from oldest to youngest?
My oldest sister, Katie, you want ages?
If you know them.
I could figure them out. Okay, I'll start with the youngest. My youngest brother, Alvin, he is 66. Then it's me. I'll be 70 in October. Then it's my brother, Jack. He will be... Bill is 73. Jack is 70. Jack is 73. Clara is 75. Pete is 80. Then was my brother John, Pius, that died. And then was Barbara. She died in 2004. She was 80 when she died. I think I'm saying this wrong. I think Pius was between Pete and Clara, not Pete and Barbara. Yes, Pius was between Pete and Clara. Okay, then after Barbara were the twins. Mary just had birthday Saturday. She's 85. Her twin sister died in 82, Lena. And above Lena was Ben. He would be 87. And then was John. And then was Katie, the oldest one. So Katie would be about 91, 2, something like that. She was born in, 15, I think. Bill should be here. He knows all those. He knows my siblings' ages better than I do. He can rattle off so many ages. It's
What type of mischief would you get into?
I remember getting a spanking from Dad with the strap. I remember the spanking, but I don't remember what I did wrong. We didn't get into real mischief, I don't think. I know in the summertime, Al and I would always play in the corn crib. That was so cool. We could put boards across, you know what a corn crib is? That's a slotted It's not really a building, but it's a slotted, it's got 4 walls with a wooden floor in it. You store your corn cobs in there, and it's open so they could dry, so they'd get air. And then, of course, in the summertime, that would be empty. And then we'd play in there, and we made cream separators out of juice cans. You know, we'd put a small hole in for the cream, and a little bigger hole, and that was the milk, and we'd pour water in there, and we'd make mud pies up there, and we'd go, the corn crib was up by the wood pile, and we'd go find boards and put steps, you know, lay it between the slots in the corner, so that created steps that we could go all the way up to the top, could sit up there. And Ma couldn't see us, or we'd get hollered at. So I guess that was mischief.
Little.
And we also had an old Chrysler car body that we played in. That was our playhouse too. And then in the spring of the year, Pete would catch little baby rabbits when they were out plowing. He'd catch little baby rabbits and bring them home, and we'd put them in there and feed them, pick grass for them and feed them, and put little sardine cans in there with water in and milk. And of course, they always died, but it was fun while it lasted. And then also in the summertime, the attic. Our house didn't have a typical attic that you had to crawl up a ladder. We had actual stairway going up there, and there was all kinds of goodies up there. We'd carry them down. Well, a lot of our toys were stored up there too. And we'd carry them down and make umpteen trips down, carry everything out in front of the house. And well, by that time it was time to carry everything back up again. But that's how we played. That's how we passed. And for shoes, well, not really for shoes. By the time I came along, my parents weren't poor like so many of them were, because I'm later, and but I dreamed of sandals, and of course never got any. So we'd take a piece of paper, cardboard paper, and we'd put holes in there and put strings across and tie them to our feet and walk to the end of the sidewalk, and then the holes were tore out, and go back and repair and try it again, and of course it never worked. And I remember wanting a pair of open-toe shoes. Oh, I wanted them so bad. Nope. Everything, you know, had to be a serviceable shoe, you know, that you got. And that one pair of open-toe shoes, I thought I could get by my mother, because they didn't really look, the picture in the catalog didn't really show it very good that it was an open toe. I thought, maybe I can get it by, Mom. No luck. I didn't get them.
What kind of toys would you play with?
We had dolls, and I remember one year for Christmas, Dad and Pete they bought a little sink. It was made out of metal. It was small, but it had an actual sink in there and an actual faucet, and even a reservoir in the back where you could pour water in and run it out through the faucet. And they build it into a cabinet. I mean, the whole thing was probably 2 feet long and 6-8 inches high. You know, it wasn't that big a deal, but they built up that sink was only about 8 inches. You know, it looked like it was built into a cupboard, and then they extended the cupboard. So that was pretty cool. And living in the basement, there was a little room underneath the basement steps that it was a catch-all. And all the old shoes were thrown in there, and every once in a while somebody would need something, and they'd dig out a pair of shoes that fit, or a shoelace, or whatever. out of there, and our toys were down there too. We'd play down in there. That was our little secret hideout. We'd wear old hats, big hats, and old shoes. We'd wear, high-heeled shoes and stuff, and just stuff like that we'd play with.
Okay. Did you ever play any games inside or outside?
Checkers, baseball outside, checkers and per franc, and that little bowling. We had checkers tournaments too. I was a pretty good checker player. I beat my dad.
Where did you learn to play these games?
I guess from Mom and Dad. Dad more so than Mom. I didn't have time. I had to cook and clean and sew and...
What about baseball? Is that learned from your dad?
Well, initially, I'm sure the older siblings, I think I learned it from my older siblings, but I'm sure Dad taught them.
And did you have bats and gloves and balls?
Yes, we did. We had bats and balls, and we had a couple of gloves. But mostly, the gloves were old and kind of wore and kind of yucky to put your hands into, so it was, to this day, I still can't catch a ball. But it was fun running around out there playing, and doing something. We'd go to, Hague had a real good baseball team. I remember going to Sunday afternoons, going to baseball games. That was a big rival between Hague and Sealand.
When you went to these games, they were in town. Did you notice a difference between the town people and the farm people?
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about it?
Well, the town people were just so much more sophisticated. They had better clothes and much, or at least we thought, they were much higher class people than we were just a farm kid, Well, I still say I'm just a little old farm girl. And, but it was just, they spoke better English than we did. And I still can't talk English decent. And a lot of that is, I think my English is getting worse because Bill and I talk German pretty much all the time when we're alone. And even with friends, we'll talk a lot of German. But then we have a few friends where maybe the wife can't talk English, German, then we'll bring out our best English. And so
There was a noticeable difference between town and
yes, there was.
life.
Yes, there was. And it seemed like they knew how to act better because they were among people more so. And then in 51, when I started high school, I got to go to high school. I was the first one in the family that went to high school. My brother took over the farm, and so my parents moved into town, so I got to go to high school. Hague High School. Kids still harass me about that. Whenever there is something to, here not too long ago, it was figuring out something about, it was something to do with figures. And I didn't catch something right away. Well, it was when our youngest son, Lee, at Christmas time, the day they came home, we had Christmas on New Year's this past year. And the day they came home from Kansas City, or came here, was just a day from hell. Snow and stuff. And we were sitting around that evening, and Lee says, North Dakota, hate it. There's no way in hell I'm going to drag a 3-month-old through all this shit next year. It didn't register. 3-month-old. Are they pregnant? No, 3-month-old. No, that's not right. And finally, he looks at Misty. They don't get it, do they? And I said, oh, you guys are pregnant? congratulations. Then the other kid said, oh, Moss hate math kicked in. So every time there is something dumb I say or whatever, you got to know Ma went to Hague. So I get harassed about high school, and I always tell them, at least I went.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Now, let's talk about school a little bit. You obviously grew up speaking German.
Yep.
So when you went to school, did you know any English?
I knew some from my older siblings, but it was tough. My dad spoke almost no English. He knew enough English to get by, but to sit and carry on a conversation, that didn't work. So of course we talked German at home. And then you go to school, and if you said a German word, you had to stay in from recess, or they were very strict about that. Well, that's really, I guess they had to be. That's really the only way they could force you to talk English. And that was hard. That was hard.
Where did you go to grade school at?
It was a school in Fraser District. It was 1.5 miles from where I grew up. It was, a country school.
So about how many people were in the school?
Not very many. That's, I don't know, 15 maybe at a peak. When I was going to school, there were only 1, 2, 3, 4 families, going. So I only had 5 for a while, and then that Feist family moved away. So I ended up with only one classmate, and he was older than I was. He was slow in school, so it wasn't much fun. I guess Papa's home.
I'm going to stop for a second then. Will you tell me a little more what the school population was like?
Well, like I said, there was maybe 15 kids. I had 2 classmates for a while, and then the one kid moved away, and then we were down to 1. And so it was small, not a lot of people to talk to or even to play with. It was different, age groups. There was one girl in the 1st grade, and then there was us, and then there was just not a lot of kids there. I remember playing Andy Iover. That was a good game. Throw the ball over the school. And I always hated to be on the north side because that's where the windows were. And you had to be careful how you threw that ball so you didn't throw in a window. And the bathroom situation was another story at school. Well, at home too. Yeah, they were all outdoor bathrooms, and they were pretty, especially in school, there was great big snowbanks and hard to get at, and climb over the snowbank, and down the other side to get to, and, they burnt coal in the furnace. There's just space heaters, but the coal had to be carried in from the shed, and I don't think I ever had a kneel on coal. I think that was past.
It wasn't used to discipline anymore?
No, not so much anymore. Well, I was a good girl too,
Well, other students got disciplined.
Well, yeah. But I don't remember any of them having to kneel. I know we had those big maps on the wall that you pull down. Oh, that was so cool. That was just, I've always liked geography. I can sit down and spend an hour just looking at a map. I go to look something up, and then, oh, that's where that is, and where's that, and where's that, and my brother's moving in California. He's moving to Dana Point, and the night before last when I was talking to him, I always forget what it's called. The other night when he said it again, I wrote it on a piece of paper now. I haven't had a chance to get the map out and look where it's at. So that to me was always interesting, to look at maps. And try and visualize that. Cool.
What class didn't you really care for?
English. I hate English. And history. I liked English better than history. In high school, world history, oh, foo, yuck. What do I care what they did? The kings and all that. Oh, crap. I hated that. Geography, I liked geography. I liked algebra. Can you imagine that? Anybody liking algebra? I got a 99 in my final exam in algebra. I thought that was pretty good for something that a good portion of the people don't like. I don't think I've ever used algebra in my life, but I liked it when I took it in school. And we had to take a class at farm school. It was called agriculture. That was interesting, but I had a hard time with it. It was hard to figure out. There were so many different breeds of animals, different classes of all your wheat and oats, different, I'll call them brand names, that's not what they are, and it didn't interest me. Deep down, I guess I'm not a farmer. Should have been a bookkeeper. I like bookwork.
Was school important to your family?
Yes and no. We all had to go simply because we had to go. But no, I don't think it was that important because in those days, you don't need high school to change diapers. If you were a girl or if you were a guy, you don't need high school to farm. So, no, it wasn't that important. The only reason I got to go to high school was because my parents moved to town and lived right across the street from school. So, I was never late.
What kind of a transition was that, going from country school to school in the town?
Big time, big time. I was a big shot. Going to school in town, wow. That was really cool. Really scary, but really, I was a big shot. I was a city kid now.
Do the students treat you different since you came from a farm school at first?
Not really, because there were a lot of farm kids. There were a lot of farm kids that were driving into town to go to school. So I wasn't the only farm kid that just came to school. There were some of the Crickemers. There's a creek north of Hague called Beaver Creek, and the people that live along that creek, they were the Crickemers. And to this day, they've got a 4-H club out there. They call the Crickemers 4-H. And a lot of those people that lived out there drove in. But they were mostly boys. I don't remember any girls driving in for high school.
Did you go to school with more boys than girls?
My class, we were 4 boys and 4 girls.
And that was in high school?
That was in high school, yep. That was the senior class. We had a few more. We lost a couple of them. But, it was pretty even.
Did you have a favorite teacher in grade school?
No.
Anyone you particularly didn't care for?
Had one that was not a good teacher. She didn't teach us well, and I was an 8th grader, and school was always 7 months, and then we had, the farm schools, and then we had to go to what they called exam school. Before you wrote your final exams, you had to go to the schools in the district. There was only exam school in one school, so the students from all the 4 schools came to one school for exam school. I think I learned more in the 2 weeks of exam school than I did the whole 7 months that year. She was just not a good teacher. She was okay, as far as liking a person, but not a good teacher. And my 5th grade teacher was Phyllis Fisher. I liked her. And my exam school teacher was Philippine Fisher. That was Phyllis's mother-in-law. She was a big woman, and she was tough. Look out. They also had a grocery store in town. And I remember they called it the butcher shop because they had fresh meats. And Ma usually shopped in Beechler's store. Not sure why, but every once in a while she'd go to the butcher shop too. They had a full line of groceries too, but they also had the meats, more meats than the other stores. And I remember Ma buying me, I wanted some ice cream, and Ma bought me a dish of ice cream. Didn't want a cone, or Ma didn't want me to have a cone. And Philby, they called her, Philippine Fisher. She brought me this big, and she walked so huffy and brought me this dish of ice cream, set it down on her. They had a desk in the back part of the store, set it on. Sit down here and eat it. Okay, I'll sit down here and eat it. I didn't like the way I was treated, but the ice cream sure was good.
In grade school, what else would you do to play besides playing Annie Over?
Fox and the Goose in the wintertime. That's a game in the snow. You make, it's like a pie, and the fox would be in the center, and you make paths. You make a big circle, and then you make paths, like you cut a piece of a pie. And the fox had to stand in the middle, in the center, and he had to chase down the geese. And you ran around. You didn't dare step out of the circle or out of the, you could cut across, but you had to be in the path. And that's how, until all the geese were caught, and then somebody else had to be the fox. So that was a fun game. And we'd go sliding down the snowbanks, and we'd play, I don't know, did we play baseball or not? We must have. And tag and stuff like that, hide and seek. So, but when there aren't a lot of kids, there's a lot of games that aren't easy to play. And usually when there were more kids in school, I was just a little shit. Didn't always get to play all the games.
Now you mentioned Fox and Goose cutting the pie. What was your mom's cooking like?
Oh, Mom was a great cook. She was great. Her food was good, and she always cooked a lot, Had nice meals, always had nice meals.
What would be a typical meal? Just on a weeknight.
Like in the wintertime, sausage and probably fried potatoes and maybe a vegetable or something like that. She'd make chicken. She'd stuff chicken with a rice dressing or with apple dressing. Apple mixed with, bread, onions, and apple. I still make that for Christmas, put it into turkey now. And she made a baked rice, which was really, really good. And then potatoes and corn or something like that. And always homemade bread. Well, there was no such thing as bought bread in those days. Always had homemade bread. And during Lent, Saturdays, we always had for dinner, we always had graut en grumber and flash, which is pork meat, boiled pork meat, and sauerkraut and potatoes. Usually, a lot of times, salted pork, and she would cut it into pieces, and always fat on that big. Tried to get away from eating that fat. Well, we didn't really have to eat the fat. We could cut it off. They didn't like it much, but they didn't make us eat it like a lot of parents did in those days. So, what else did we have? Something I didn't like that she made was rivel soup, which is rivels in milk. That rivel is little dough balls. 8 drops they're called. You can buy them in the store now called 8 drops. But Mother would make her own, and she'd make them in milk. I hated that. I just hated that hot milk. And that was a Friday night meal. You know, back in those days there was no meat allowed on Fridays all year long, not just during Lent like it is now. So she'd make rice and raisins a lot. We had a lot of fried potatoes. We had, what else? Placenta, which is a pumpkin turnover, and potato soup. Now, most people eat that with bean soup. My mother never made bean soup, so I don't like bean soup today. I don't care for that. But we always had it with potato soup, and that's still how I make it. Yeah, we had elephant ears with we called it Schmutzkieche. Now it's called fry bread or elephant ears, which is just a piece of dough stretched and deep fried. Well, she just put fat, didn't have deep fryers, just put fat in a kettle or a pan and fry it. That was a Friday meal.
What would she make for, say, Christmas or a special occasion?
Chicken. Chicken with stuffing and that rice on the side. And Ma was a big chicken fan. Well, we didn't, they were pretty self-sufficient. They didn't go buy turkeys. And you didn't buy ham. You made your own. When they'd butcher in the fall, they'd put the hams in salt water. They'd cure them. And they'd eat that ham, during the winter, and the sausage, and butchering days.
Tell me about those.
They were quite the days. They'd heat the water in the house, in the basement. They put it on to boil in a big boiler, great big kettle. And they'd go out in the barn and they'd stab the pigs, drain the blood, catch the blood in a little green bowl, and then they'd bring it in the house, and Millie would have to stir that blood until it was cold. It had to be stirred constantly so it wouldn't clot, and they used that blood to make blood sausage. Now, how I could eat that blood sausage after stirring that ugly blood, that just ailed me something terrible. Oh, I hated stirring that blood, and that was always my job. Then they'd come in, of course, when they brought the blood in, then they'd take the boiling water out, they'd put it into a big tub, a barrel, and then they'd put the hogs in there and scald them. And then they'd pull them out, and then they'd scrape all the hair off, and then they'd bring them in the house, and then they'd cut them up, cut all the skins off. First they'd scrape all the hair off, and then they bring them in, and then they cut all the skin off the meat. And then they'd use some of that skin to make head cheese. So we didn't make a lot of head cheese. I don't remember head cheese from at home. I've learned to like that since I'm married, But, and Pa never made liver sausage either, but we made blood sausage and fry sausage and the hams, and that was a big, hard day. And then all the meat had to be ground, turned by hand. And we had the grinder hooked onto an old table we had in the back room, and that would move so much. I remember having to sit on that table for weight. I was a skinny little girl. I don't know how much weight I put on that table, but I guess it helped. And when it was all ground, then it had to be mixed with all the spices and stuff. And the casings were cleaned. They didn't buy casings. The intestines from the hogs were cleaned. That was another job I liked. Dad had his board and his knife where he cleaned the casings, and he'd sit there and he'd scrape the you-know-what out of the casings, and I had to stand there like this, pour a little water on here and pour water on, because that smelled. That was not a nice job. And so I always had to help Dad clean the casings. And then when the sausage was stuffed, then they took it out and smoked it. Dad had made a smokehouse and built a fire in there and smoked the sausage. And good eating after that.
How long would it take you to butcher? Would it be just a day long? Or?
It was a day-long job. And then the next day, Ma would can some of the meat, and some of the sausage got canned. Some of the sausage that wasn't smoked, that got canned. So that was all done, and the lard was rendered the next day. So it was pretty much a 2-day job. And I remember, like on days when I'd be in school, coming home from school, and the house was all humid from all the boiling water and stuff. The water would be running down the walls down the basement, and the windows would be all fogged up, and Pete would be in his undershirt standing there turning the meat grinder, and so those were hard days.
Did you only butcher hogs? Or did you...
We only butchered hogs. I don't remember ever butchering a beef. Okay. They maybe did, but I don't remember it.
Did you guys ever make your own root beer?
Oh, yes. That was a delicacy. Ma always made root beer. And she was good at it. She very seldom blew any bottles. But once in a while it would get wild. I remember when we when the trashing crew was there, we'd take root beer out to the field, for lunch. And we'd always take a nail and pound it in the top, make a little hole on top of the root beer bottle to let some of the pressure escape. Otherwise, if you would just pop the lid off, half of it would go wild. Like when you shake a beer and open it up, it all overflows. That's how root beer was. But oh, it was so good. It was, this bought stuff is nothing.
Would she make it year-round?
Yep, year-round. Whenever it was all, she'd make another batch. We always had root beer.
What about, did you make your own beer, your own wine?
Dad made some wine. I only remember him making beer once. A lot of those traditions kind of died out till I came along. Like I said, I was number 11. So my parents were older. My mother was just a few days off of, well, I was born on the 17th and her birthday was the 20th. She turned 40 on the 20th and I was born on the 17th. So the only way I remember my parents is old. And so they were a little, not wealthier, but better established than some of the other people, the younger people. So a lot of the tradition, the hardworking traditions were passed
Okay.
before my time.
So he didn't distill anything either?
Didn't what?
Did he distill any alcohol of his own?
No,
Okay.
not to my memory. I'm sure it was done earlier, but like I said, I remember him making beer once. And wine. Ma would make wine.
Okay.
That was Ma's job, not Dad's. The beer was Dad's, but Ma made the wine.
What kind of wine?
Chook cherries. Or once in a while, grapes. They would buy, what are they called? Concord grapes, and make wine out of them. But that was costly, so that wasn't done very often. Yeah. So.
Did you guys ever, was anybody in your family musical? Did anybody sing or play any instruments when you were growing up?
Nope. I'm the only one that sings.
When did you start singing?
When I was in high school in Hague, spent a lot of time sitting on the cafe steps. They had these real neat steps out front that you could sit on. They had kind of sides built on, and they were just cool to sit on and watch the world go by. And the K.E. Fisher, he was the organist in church. He was the postmaster in town, and he lived on top of the post office, which was across the street from the cafe. And my voice carries. I mean, if I want you to hear something, I don't care where you are, you're going to hear it, unless you're in the next county. But when we built our new church, the one guy on the church board thought it had to be that we use microphones up by the choir. Millie, you should use microphones when you announce the song. He says, John, if I want you to hear it, you're going to hear it. You know, when I say something in the building, like somebody said here not long, a couple of weeks ago, yeah, you can hear when Millie's in town. Yeah. If it's not my laugh, I have a unique, different, I don't know how unique it is, but it is definitely an outstanding laugh. Everybody knows my laugh. So if I let out a good hearty laugh, you know Millie's in town.
How important was religion to you during your childhood or in your family?
Important. During Lent, we prayed daily rosary. Always prayed before meals. Always had to say our night prayers. Never missed Mass on Sundays. Unless, just a blizzard or whatever. But I remember going to church in the sled with the horses, because the roads were blocked. And, Saturdays we had catechism. Got to go to town on Saturdays, and we got a nickel to spend. Big stuff. 4th of July, I got $1 to spend. Hey, that was enough to buy a malted milk. That was a treat.
Was that the only thing you'd buy? Was just a malted milk?
Well, I'd buy more because I'd always run in the foot races, and I usually won, so I'd get more money there. So, yeah, malted milk and ice cream, seeds, and pop. I know I was real jealous of this one girl in high school. Every night after school, she went down to the store, and her mother allowed her to buy a bottle of pop and a candy bar and charge it. And charging was an unheard of word in the Glatt house. So that's something I really envied her, but of course I was better off not having that. But when you're a kid, you're not really a kid when you're in high school, but still, you want things like, you always want what you can't have. So, and religion, Saturdays we'd go to catechism, always take us into catechism. And once we lived in town, Ma and Dad went to Mass every day. And a lot of times I did too. I'd get up and go to church. And we always had, Saturday nights, we had benediction. And we always went to that. And back in those days, you didn't go to communion every time you went to church. You went to church Saturday nights. You went to confession. The next morning, you went to communion, and that's it. You didn't go to communion again until you went to confession again. So, in a way, that was better than it is now. People don't go to confession enough anymore. And you had a fast from midnight on, which was really hard. And when we'd go to confession, Ma would always take the water dipper out of the water pail the next morning so you wouldn't accidentally drink water. So we always had 2 masses on Sundays, and when you'd go to confession, normally we went to late mass, but when we go to confession and communion, you always went to early mass, so you didn't have to wait so long to eat and drink. And, you asked when I started singing. Anyway, sitting on the cafe steps with my loud voice, I think he kind of picked me out, and one day he came over. How would you like to sing in the church choir? Sing in the church choir? That put me up another notch. That was like moving to town almost, because I always liked music, never had any opportunity to play. I would see a school, whatever function, where there was a band. The sliding trombone always fascinated me. But by the time I got to high school, there was no more band. They didn't have a band at the time, so I never got to play a musical instrument. But he took me upstairs to their living quarters, and he showed me, everything was in Latin at that time. Showed me the notes, the black ones. You don't hold quite as long, and when they're up a little on the line, you have to go up higher, and if they're white, those you have to hold longer, and that's how I still sing. The black ones are shorter than the longer ones, and the ones that have a little tail are even shorter, and that's all I know about music, but I've been singing in church choir ever since. Our son Alvin tells the story. Yeah, Ma's been in the choir forever. And we'd take up a whole pew in church. Bill and the rest of the kids would be downstairs. And we'd get a little rambunctious, and all Dad had to do was lean forward and look down the line, and we sat up straight. We were all nice behaved.
Do you have any other memories about food that you would like to share?
Well, I know we had a lot. Ma would bake bread every week, of course, sometimes more than once, usually close to the weekend. So on Fridays, there were always dumplings. And usually for lunch, because the bread dough was ready by lunchtime for dumplings. And then for the evening, a lot of times we had, we called them geschnittene Nudle, and all it is egg noodles made with eggs and flour and water and stuff, and rolled out like a pie crust, bigger, dried to where they were manageable, where it wasn't dough anymore. And then she'd roll them up, cut them into strips, and roll them over, and then she'd cut them real thin. And we'd cook them and eat that with watermelon. Or like in the wintertime, sometimes there was prunes with those noodles. Prunes would be cooked. So those are delicacies I remember from home. I don't make them much now, except when I'm alone, I'll make them. Bill doesn't, well, now he's diabetic, so he can't have stuff like that. So, and doesn't care for it either, so that's no big punishment.
Did you guys make homemade ice cream?
Oh, yes.
How did you make that?
We had a really old freezer. They'd cook the pudding part, and they'd add milk and cream and cool it, and then they'd put it into an ice cream freezer. We had a freezer, an ice cream freezer. Packed it in ice. It was a bucket with a can in the center, and they'd pack ice with salt around the outside. A lot of people still make homemade ice cream that way now, but now they're electric. We had a crank one, and it was old, and the gears didn't match up very good anymore. So little Millie had to sit on the ice cream freezer to make the gears connect, so it would go. And they'd turn until it was really hard to turn. That told you that it was done. Take it out and num, num, num. Ma would usually cook some homemade chocolate to put on it, and that was a good treat. So,
what would you take to school for lunch?
We had a lot of peanut butter sandwiches, jelly sandwiches, once in a while some leftover cold sausage. The neighbor kids brought a lot of halva, and oh, did we drool when they'd bring this big chunk of halva and would chow down on it. And we didn't have any, so.
Can you explain what that is?
We always told our kids halva's made from dry cow bones. I don't know what it's actually made from. When our kids were young, I'd buy it at Bismarck in the warehouse. I'd buy a whole big stick like that with 6 pounds for $5, $6. And now you pay $3 for just a narrow strip like that.
You're not sure what it's actually made out of?
No, I'm not. But it's very tasty. It's sweet, and I don't know what it's made of. What's it called in German, Bill? No help?
Well, that's right. Well, staying with food a little bit, how would your family celebrate Christmas?
We basically, chicken was the staple in our family. That was usually the Christmas dinner. Of course, everything had to be clean, big time house cleaning that Christmas Eve day, and Ma did all kinds of baking and stuff, and we would each get a box. She would make boxes. She'd put, use shoe boxes, and she'd put in a bunch of peanuts, some figs, a few cookies, and some candy, and a whole orange. That was a treat. Because we got oranges, for breakfast, but always only a half. And in our Christmas box, there was a whole orange. Then I always went ahead and I made partitions in that box. I had to separate everything. I'd take little pieces of cardboard and I'd push the peanuts to one end, then put up a partition, a wall, and then the candy would go, and then the figs would go, and the orange usually laid on top of the peanuts. And the cookies, everything would be separate. Nothing can touch each other.
Would you go to Mass as well?
Absolutely. After supper, then, we opened gifts. Santa Claus came when we were little. When we were older once, there was no more Santa Claus because we were the youngest too, so that Santa Claus thing ended pretty soon. I don't remember much about Santa Claus. But then after the gift openings, then we'd usually take a nap and always go to midnight Mass, always. I don't remember ever missing midnight Mass.
Would your family sing Christmas carols?
No. I think a lot of that is because of the language barrier. Us younger kids, we'd know the English songs, and my parents would know the German version. And in those days, unless you were in the choir, you didn't sing in church. There wasn't, the whole parish would not sing. It was always just the choir. And a lot of that, I think, was because of the Latin. Because, the Mass was sung in Latin too. And I don't think we ever sang anything in church that wasn't Latin. That was first many years later when we started with the English. And so no, we didn't sing Christmas carols.
How would your family celebrate Easter?
I remember going to church all 3 days. I don't remember when we went to confession. I know there were long lines. It was a lot of standing and waiting and waiting and waiting. But I don't remember on what day we went. But I remember going to church on Holy Thursday and Good Friday. Not on Saturday. Mom and Dad would go in Saturday mornings. The Easter Vigil was, well, it wasn't called Easter Vigil. It was Holy Saturday. And church was in the morning. And then we'd go to church on Sunday, Easter Sunday.
Would you guys come home and would you have an Easter basket? Would you find Easter eggs?
Yeah. We had a cistern by the house. You know what a cistern is? It's a water reservoir outside, underground, where you catch rainwater from the house. Okay. And then we had a pump in the house where we had running water if we pumped it, for washing your hands and things like that, and dishes and stuff. And anyway, by that cistern, we always made nests. We didn't have baskets. We made nests for where the Easter bunny would lay his eggs. Sometimes when it was real windy or quite cold yet, we would get a board there so the Easter bunny could lay the board on so the wind wouldn't blow everything away. But we didn't get candy in our baskets. We just got eggs. So I don't know how that Easter bunny got those eggs there. He's a candy man, not an egg man. But we had Easter candy in the house then, but not in the basket.
Would your mom fix anything special for Easter?
Not that I remember. Nothing. It's pretty ordinary.
And did you guys celebrate the names day of the church?
Church feast, big time.
When was your church's?
That's August 15th, because Hague was St. Mary's. So that was not just a church feast, it was also a holy day of obligation. So, yeah, Mom cooked and baked and butchered chickens. And, there was always such a house full of people that just didn't hardly fit. And there was people there for dinner, and then people for supper, and just people. And then my parents, I don't think there were ever kids along. This was an adult thing. They would go to like Strasburg's church feast, and I don't know where else, but to the creek, to that church they would go. Wherever they had relatives. This was basically a relative thing. You'd visit relatives. There were some friends too, but
you kids would have to stay back to do the chores.
Chores and wash the dishes.
And did you celebrate your name's day or just your parents' name's days?
In my family, my mother's name's day was celebrated. That was November 20th, I think, St. Elizabeth. And they'd always have quite a few people in for company. And once in a great while, one time I remember they rolled up the carpeting upstairs and they had music and they danced for the name's day. But that was only once that I remember. So, but...
Which was your favorite, or what was your favorite holiday while you were growing up?
Christmas. Presents. I still like Christmas. Still, I don't know, it's family time, like now, our kids all come home for Christmas. But I don't remember that at home, Well, because I'm one of the younger ones, but not everybody came home for Christmas. My sister that lived east of here, they would come for Christmas, and my sister that lived in Pollock, they would come for Christmas usually. But usually not Christmas Eve so much. Usually the next day for Christmas dinner, But my sister that lived in Ipswich, they never came for Christmas because they had their own house full of kids that needed Christmas at home, It's like after we were married, when our kids were growing up, we didn't go to my parents anymore for Christmas. We'd try and make it during the season sometime, but not Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or anything like that, because we did our own thing here. And then plus usually on Bill's side of the family, they got together more. We'd always get together either at the farmhouse, and then as the family grew, then we'd rent a hall or church basement or something.
Well, now I'm talking about you and your husband. How'd you two meet? Get your side of the story.
It was after my sister got married into this neck of the woods, and I'd go to her house, to visit, and every once in a while those two Wald boys were there. I couldn't decide which one I liked better. But when we grew up, so it's hard to say when we met exactly. It's just like we've always known each other. And it was just, they were around a lot, and he was kind of charming. And so, yeah, when he came home from the service and I came home from California, when I'd been up to here with California, and we started dating again and went to Butte and worked out there a while and came home and got married. And the rest is history.
What was dating like in your teenage years?
Usually going to a show or going to a dance. Or usually you went to the dance Dutch and, found a date there, brought you home, if you were lucky. And go out for lunch, maybe at during intermission. Those days they had intermission at 12 o'clock or sometimes 11:30. They'd take like a half hour, 45 minutes off. The band would quit playing, and everybody would go eat something. A lot of them went to the bar and car, get a few kisses, and then back and dance some more. Clean your face and put your lipstick on again.
So if you would just hang out with your friends, you would mainly go into dances?
Mm-hmm.
Which towns did you like to go to for dances?
Hague, Strasbourg, once in a while Zeeland, but usually it was Hague and Strasbourg.
Okay. You were talking about teenage years dancing, what you would go and do.
Like in the wintertime, I would hang, through high school, I would hang out up, we'd go uptown and just hang out in the bowling alley and play the jukebox and dance, and sometimes we'd bowl, but that cost money. That the nickel or dime or whatever it was to play the jukebox, that we could afford better than, I think bowling was a quarter. That was a lot of money. So, and then when there was a dance in town, then we went to the dance, or Sunday nights, a bunch of us would get together, us girls, and there was always somebody that was willing to give us a ride to Strasbourg or Linton. Usually shows never, I don't think Strasbourg ever had movies. We always went to Linton to the show. Once in a while we had pay the driver like 50 cents or something like that to give us a ride. But hey, it was a ride out of town. It was a way to get there. And we didn't have cars. I didn't know how to drive until after I was married. Bill taught me how to drive. And But it was always movies and dances. That was the main entertainment.
Did you have a favorite movie?
No.
Did you have a favorite type of movie when you were a kid?
I like musicals. I like westerns. But I just went. I just wanted to go.
Just get out of town.
Yep.
Had to go do something.
Yep.
That would be a lot of fun. Now, for your wedding, what was it like? What was your wedding like? Tell me about the day.
We started, that was something new. We had a photographer come into the house. And being we had a double wedding, I got dressed early in the morning. Mass was at 10. So by about 7:30 or 8, the photographer was at the house, and I was dressed ready for pictures. And took pictures, and then the other bride came and took her pictures at the house. And then we went to church, got married. Church was at Hague. This was all at Hague. And then we went from Hague to Zeeland. The reception was at Zeeland. For dinner, we had soup, we had chicken, we had mashed potatoes, I imagine a vegetable of some kind, I'm not sure, pie, and then we danced all afternoon. Supper was sausage, potato salad, I don't know what else. Put the supper dishes away and the tables away, and then we danced again until wee hours of the night. So yeah, those were long weddings, you know. And for me, I would dance with all these people that were invited from Bill's side of the family. I mean, these were strangers to me. And I remember one name in particular that seemed so weird to me, and that was Frank Ziegler. I thought, God, is that a weird name? But he was nice enough to come and get the bride to dance. I had to dance with him, and, you know, you make small talk while you're dancing. But I remember that name really seemed different. You know, we didn't have names like that in Hague. And I didn't get out much.
Did you guys take a honeymoon?
Yep.
Where'd you go?
Bismarck. Mandan. We were gone 3 whole days. And on the 3rd day, we were both ready to come home and open the gifts. We wanted to know what we got. But as far as special as that double wedding thing was, that was really unique and different. And I guess I'm that kind of a person. I'm always looking for something out of the ordinary. But I would never do that again. Because now, it's not just our anniversary, mine and Bill's. The other couple is always involved. You want to celebrate your anniversary, they would like to do it this way. We would kind of like to do it that way. And our 50th coming up pretty soon. And we celebrated 25 and 40, and I say we're not doing 50. Psh, guess who's going to lose? It's going to be me.
There are worse things you could lose at.
That's true. That's true. Yep. It's not that bad. But what I'm saying is the crowd is so huge that you can't hardly get around, you know, and that makes it less fun. It would be more special if it was just our day and not have to include another whole family. You know, she's got a bunch of kids, we've got a bunch of kids, and, you know, married and grandkids and in-laws and neighbors and friends. They have their friends, we have our friends, and standing room only. At the 40th we had at Napoleon, we had like almost 600 people there. And that's too much.
Well, it's good to know you have a lot of family and friends.
That's true.
But it's a lot of people.
It is a lot of people. It takes away from the day, too, to have that many people there. Because there's no way you're going to be able to even acknowledge everybody that's there. And it takes away from the personal thing. Yeah, we know a lot of their friends and their relatives, but still not just ours. We have to share. So.
What was your childhood? What do you think was the most adventurous thing you did?
Rolling down the hill in the buggy into the dam. Not a lot of, nothing really adventurous. Pretty dull life.
Buggy was pretty adventurous though.
Yeah?
What is your happiest childhood memory?
I don't know. It's too long ago.
Well, go on the other one. What is the most stressful childhood experience you had?
I don't know that either much. I guess when my grandpa died. I was pretty young. That was pretty stressful. That seemed weird that all of a sudden he's gone. Can't be part of our life anymore. And now we come to Grandma's house and there's only Grandma there. And as much as I hated the ho, ho, ho head shaking thing that he always did, still missed him, you know. So.
Yeah. For a happiest memory, could you just share maybe just a happy memory that stands out in your mind, even if it's not the happiest?
Well, one happy memory I remember about Christmas is that year for Christmas. I was a teenager already. Must have been, well, maybe not quite a teenager. About a 7th grader or something like that. I got a dress, a pair of shoes, and a necklace for Christmas. That was special. It was a pretty fancy schmancy dress. And open toe and open heel shoes.
Can you describe what the dress looked like?
The dress was emerald green, and it had a short, just kind of a cap, not really a sleeve, and kind of a stand-up collar with a little bit of a V here, you know, a little opening here. And it had black, kind of like black velour flowers on it. You know, you could buy wallpaper like that for a long time there, you know, where, I don't know what you'd call it.
Yeah.
But anyway, then that necklace, it was green with the flowers on there were black, and the shoes were black. It was a sling pump, and the necklace was a rhinestone that fit very nicely into that opening in the dress. And that was pretty special that year. I remember feeling pretty big.
Are there any other childhood memories you'd like to add?
I don't think I can think of any more. I remember how our milk was froze when we'd get to school. And water, of course, that was, usually didn't take water. But the milk, we always got milk. We always took milk, and that was always froze till we'd, you know, in the winter time. And I remember lunch was in a gallon bucket, and then we had, it was a little pail about half as tall as a gallon bucket, but it had a handle on too, and that's where Ma would set in the 3 jars of milk. And they were all 3 different, so this is mine, and this is yours, and this is yours. So we make sure and get our own thing.
Mm-hmm. Any others?
No, I don't think so.
Well, why do you think it's important to tell your life story?
People need to be able to look back and see what life was like when we were growing up. to get a better understanding of why we are the way we are, and realize things. It's important for like our, not so much our kids, they pretty much understand it, but the grandkids, it's important for them to know how we grew up, how tough life was, why we pinch our pennies the way we do. And you know, you asked earlier how important religion was. We wouldn't be where we are if it wouldn't be for religion. I know we couldn't have got through Kurt's death without our faith and our ancestors. That's what brought him here, is the freedom of religion and stuff. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. That's fine.
So, I'm okay. So, yeah, religion is important, and it's important that the younger generation understands how life evolves through all of that, why we are the way we are. It's as simple as that.
That works. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I don't think so. I know when I talk about, to some of the older grandkids, talk about how we did things, I really don't think they believe me. I really don't think, I know I teach CCD. At my age, I have to teach catechism. And I was telling my class this winter how we used to have to fast all through Lent, and how we used to not be able to eat and drink from midnight on before we could go to communion. They were just blown away. They just couldn't believe that. I would starve if I couldn't eat, before church. And now they think it's the end of the world if they have to fast an hour before church, before communion, not even before church, just so it's an hour before communion. Oh, is that tough? Whoever made that rule? Well, come on. Sacrifice a little. Look what our Lord sacrificed for us. So.
Is there anybody you think that would be good for the program to be interviewed?
I would really like for you to interview Dan and Katie Klein, and Pete and Lillian Welder, I feel would be good. There's another old guy, Jake Rutschke. Well, his wife is now in the home. But he's a very alert, he's in his 80s, but he's got a really good mind. I think he could tell you some stories. Right. Other than that, I don't know.
Get the information tree formed when we're done here.
Okay.
But thank you very much. We've appreciated both of your
not a problem.
The stories you've shared.
Not a problem.
Thank you.